Hi, I'm John Doe, and welcome to my drum and bass production course for the DNB Academy. My real name is João Fregoso, and I've been making music for more than 15 years, which most of that time was under my previous alias called Frags. After endless hours on the road, more than 50 releases, and the creation of my own label called Surveillance Music, John Doe was born as a culmination of all those years of experience and hard work. On this course, you will see me build the track from the ground up. You'll learn how to design your own drums, your own basses and synths, while mixing all these elements as we go. All the files, presets and templates will be available in this pack, so you can either mimic these processes or reverse engineer them so you can take the most out of these tools.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Alpha Rhythm here. Happy April 17th. That is 174 or 417 if you're here in the United States, because we do a lot of things backwards here in this great country that I live in. So it doesn't make much sense here. But if you are elsewhere, it's National Drum and Bass Day, International Drum and Bass Day. And to celebrate, we're going to talk about some drum and bass. We're going to do some track breakdowns. Yes, you heard me right. I said track breakdowns. We're going to be doing two of my tracks. Because my tracks, hey man, they're not very complicated. And I can't talk for too incredibly long about one. So we'll be talking for a little while about this first track, Dunsworth. I've had a lot of requests for a breakdown of this track. And then we're going to be talking about Fourth Dimension, which is the title track of my forthcoming Focus Recordings EP. So we're going to be looking at an older track of mine and a newer track of mine. This track came out back in 2020 on my first Focus Recordings EP. And then you'll get to look at one of my newer tracks, which is coming out April 28th on Focus. So there's about 2 years that separate these tracks, 2 years and about 4 months, 2 years, 3 months, sorry, between the release of these two tracks. But not a whole lot's changed in the way I produce tracks. The approach to both of these tracks was very different. And, I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And they were written during very, very different times. This track was written during lockdown, kind of at the height of COVID. I was unemployed. I was just sitting and writing drum and bass. In fact, that's when I started to write drum and bass, as some of you probably know. Now I'm employed and married, and a lot has changed since then. But anyway, this first track, Dunsworth, is one of my favorite tracks that I've ever written. This, along with Tranquility, might be my two favorite solo tracks of mine. I've done a number of collabs that I'm very, very fond of. But out of my personal solo stuff, I just love this track. And I'm just so happy with the way that it turned out. This, like many of my tracks, the majority of it was written in one session. I tend to work like that. I not to say that every time I sit down I write a whole track. On the contrary, oftentimes I sit down and I just don't get anywhere. For every 10, 20, 30 times that I get a good sketch going, there might be one time that I actually complete that sketch, and but the most important thing, I think, is to just put yourself in that position. Get in the studio, get writing, and get sketches, and get to sketching, and sometimes those sketches will turn into songs, and like I said, 20, 30 times, you might not get anything, and then that one time you get a Dunsworth, or you get a Tranquility. And anyway, talking of Tranquility, that's the track that I broke down last year here on the Drum and Bass Academy YouTube page. So if you want to check out that track, which is, again, my personal favorite track that I've ever produced, you can find that in the archive from last year. So yeah, we're just going to break this down. Look at this. I mean, it's not complicated at all. There's not much happening here. There's it's not going to take long to break it down. But that just goes to show, like, sample selection, especially with this kind of liquid drum and bass, is everything. There's quite a bit of MIDI here in this project here, where it's basically samples here at the top, good little bit of MIDI there, and then all MIDI down at the bottom. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start here at the top. We're going to start with the drums. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the drums because there's just not much there to talk about. Again, sample selection is everything. First, we have these no-place drums. You'll hear them in a lot of songs. They're in the Breakage sample pack. And I've chopped up the loop quite a bit, as you can see here, and no processing on them at all. That is my lead drum track. And there's nothing done to them. There is, however, a little bit of processing on the drum group. Here, if we go ahead and start from the beginning here, I'll just solo the drums. And we've got some volume automation, and we've got an EQ, right? So the EQ, pretty normal stuff. Maybe it'll help if I'm down here. There we go. The EQ opens up. Our drums start here at bar 17, pretty normal stuff. And you can look at the EQ right here, opening. So to start with, we've got two think breaks, because the think break is my favorite break. I know that's kind of heresy because this is drum and bass, and the amen should be my favorite break, but the think break is my favorite break. Sorry, I just wanted to stop for that. Simple little think break, and then we've got it slowed down for these two bars right before the drop. That's a technique I've used in a number of my songs. I do believe Andre, Human Nature, and I used that technique in our first collab. Our second collab, which is Keeping On, featuring the marvelous, the fantastic Leo Wood. So anyway, let's get back. Yeah. This had a double kick in it, and you can see it does happen here, right here. But it has it like really frequently, and I didn't like it happening that often. I really only wanted it to happen. It happens, 3 times? 1, 2, 3. So I did some edits. I got the drum break sounding the way I wanted it to. The next drum break we have is just lifted from a Critical Event and Alexander song. As the saying goes, good artists borrow, great artists steal. I'm not a great artist. And I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but this is taken from the Shrine sample pack. Alexander put this sample pack out, and it's got tons of Nick drums, lots and lots of drums that were taken from other songs. If a producer puts their drums out there for you to nick, you should take them. That's what I say, because you'd be an idiot not to. They've done all the hard work for you, so just, take their drums, right? Everyone does it. If someone says they're not doing it, chances are they're lying to you. I did mentoring sessions with Willem. For years. He's the one that taught me to produce. And one of my early tracks, this is just a think break, and we got another think break. These are both from a comic sample pack called Think About It. But anyway, Willem, he was helping me with my drums early on, and I'm trying to do all this really hard work, make all these drums from scratch and layer and snares and all this stuff. And he's like, hey man, just get some good samples, get some good drum loops. And then I think he might have given me this Caliber one. This is from the Shrine sample pack. He gave me a Caliber break though. He said, hey, I took this from a Caliber song. Sorry, Villain, to put you on blast, but he said, hey, I took this from a Caliber song. It's a great break. Try layering this drum break with your drums. So I'm not just saying like go take someone's drums and use them whole cloth. My suggestion is, build your own loops out of existing loops. And not even my suggestion. That's just what I do. Listen, I'm just telling you what I do. You can do whatever you want. You can, go talk crap. You can go talk to your friends, be like, Alfred steals other people's drums. But this entire genre is based around sampling, sampling Amen Brother, sampling these songs that, if it wasn't for the Think Break and the Amen Break, we wouldn't have, the Amen Break, we wouldn't have drum and bass, right? So if someone else puts their drums out there, especially if it doesn't have anything on top of it, just take them. Do yourself a favor. A lot of the hard work's been done for you, so just go ahead and take them. So yeah, I mean, the drums, again, they're simple. There's going to be an EQ on each one of these, right? There's an EQ there. There's some compression. There's an EQ there. I just wanted the tippy tops of this Think Break. Same with this one. It's got kind of a funky EQ on it, we can see. Yeah, and then there's this caliber break. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much else to say about the drums. There's this little delayed guy here at the very end, which you probably heard right here, just to kind of fade our drums out right at the end there. So that helps us transition into the breakdown, right? So that's it for the drums. EQ on all of them except for this. Well, there's an EQ on all of them. There's this EQ8 with some slight transient shaping. The bottom of the kick is scooped out always. Here, let me just jump ahead to the second drop. We've got a tiny little dip around a little over 1K. And right here, a lot of the low end of the kick, or some of the low end of the kick, rather, is taken out. Just thought it was a little too weighty. And this is kind of a nice liquidy tune, right? I didn't want a big thumpy kick. You want a strong kick, but I thought it was a little too overpowering. So. Let's get on to the piano. So this is the sample that I started the song with. I usually start a song with like a hook, right? I find a sample that I'm resonating with, and the reason this is called Trailer Park here is this piano reminded me of the piano from the intro song to Trailer Park Boys, which, if you're not familiar with Trailer Park Boys, it is a Canadian sitcom, and it's very good. But anyway, it's in the same key as the Trailer Park Boys theme, and it's this kind of melancholic piano. So I start with that. I just loved that piano. It's just, a good sample is what makes a good liquid track, right? And then we've got this piano too, so, which is very loopable. And you'll see that a lot of my instruments in a lot of my tracks, they're kind of doubled up like this, and that's because I tend to, and you could do this with a send and a return and all that, whatever. They have different amounts of reverb on them, right? So we've got a relatively dry one and a relatively wet one, and the same with these two. So there's going to be saturation, reverb, and an EQ on just about everything. Those are my go-tos, right? And I tend to use Ableton stock stuff because it's great. I love Ableton stock reverb. I have Fab Filter and all this stuff. I don't know. I have Little Altar Boy. I have all these plugins that I spent all this money on. And then I just tend to use Ableton stock stuff. That's just me. I think Ableton's great. If you don't use Ableton, I know people really like Valhalla reverbs. Yeah, I just like the Ableton stock stuff. And I love Ableton saturation, a bit warmer. You'll see that's my go-to, especially for bass lines. So this is the song. I've got these little piano bits. And my kind of well, this is kind of songwriting 101. Is I'll introduce an element in the intro, and then it will come out, and then we'll reintroduce it later in the song, right? So that's what happens with this piano is, we've got automation on it, just like everything. You can watch the automation. It's bringing it out. And this piano is coming in to kind of replace it at the drop. And then we drop without it for 32 bars, and then we bring it back at 65, right? Yep. So just vibing with it. There's also this little sample here. A lot of these samples, I warp my samples. I stretch them out. I speed them up. I do things, to try to modify them. I pinch them up. I pitch them down, so that they're not, people will knock splice, whatever. Some of the best producers in the world use splice. Again, I'm not saying I'm a great producer. I'm just saying that there's absolutely no reason not to use the tools at your disposal, and that's my opinion. And my all-time favorite producer, who is Bop, when he gets sketches going, he just goes on splice, right? He finds some samples that inspires him, and then he throws them in, and he reverses them, and he puts reverb and delay on them, and warps them this way, and speeds them up and slows them down, and pitches them up and pitches them down, until he gets kind of something fun. That's what I do as well. So anyway, I got these samples off of Splice, these three in particular. I think that's about it for Splice samples that you're going to see. But that's the crux of the song, right? So I found 3 Splice samples, 1, 2, 3. And this one's just, it's just a little harp guy, right? Like, it's just this little dum dum dum. And it's, nothing fancy. I just vibed with it, right? It's a very subtle element. So yeah, that's kind of the hook of the song. Those are my samples. We've got this little hive thing going here. Just some simple like MIDI stuff. We've got some omnisphere breathing and swells, alpine grain shimmer. These are some transition effects, to kind of keep the song moving along. Nothing fancy here. Just some white noise and stuff to give the song texture. I'm not doing a ton, so you want to make sure the song never feels too empty and clinical, right? Liquid should feel very organic and full of texture, and it should have a feel to it. So yeah, that's this little bit here. Here we've got some drone notes. We probably got the root in the 3rd or the root in the 5th or something like that. Got some EQ on them. And if you're doing drone notes are another good way to kind of fill out your song. If your triad, if you're in D minor, play a D minor chord and use your root, your 3rd, and your 5th. You can safely play all of those notes for the entirety of your song. That's what's called a drone note. And it just, you end up, if you have enough single notes throughout your song, you end up building chords, even if it's unintentionally. That's the way, if you think about it, that's the way a lot of, orchestral pieces are written, right? Some instruments are incapable of playing more than one note at a time, right? So you need, so what do we have? We have an A and a D, right? You need different notes to play that. Like if you wanted to play an A minor, you need, someone to play that A. You need someone to play that, anyway, you know what I mean? And just basic knowledge of music theory of things like triads or extended chords or inverted chords, that can go a long way to helping you with music production. You don't have to be a music theory master, but just some basic rudimentary music theory knowledge goes a long way. Yeah, this sample, we have one last thing before we get to that Eckhart Tolle sample. And that's just this fun little vocal thing, right? And it's what I did with this sample is I froze the delay. So it's like an infinite delay. It's called freeze in Ableton. It's enabling freeze causes the delay to endlessly cycle. So it's really neat. I just really got this cool effect, right? So and I freeze it right here, right at the second drop. So here's, if you listen, we'll just play it from right before. And let's watch what the EQ does, right? Let me go ahead and put the automation on so you can see. There's that EQ filter, and then there's this. So it starts strong, kind of pulls it out, opens back up. See down here? And now back down. And then it kind of continues to close for the rest of the song. Eventually. It eventually goes away entirely. I don't. Let's see. I'm curious because I wrote this song so long ago. Wonder what this. Here's the original sample again. Like, so I got this whole sample here. Oops. Let's just take all the processing off of it. Let's just hear what the sample is, because I don't remember. So yeah, I just used the very beginning of it. It's nice. So, you know, just find what inspires you, man, and use it. Use it in new and different ways, right? And one thing that inspires me greatly are the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. I love Eckhart Tolle.
Stillness is not ultimately an auditory.
So on this, just some basic vocal processing in the spoken word sample. We've got an EQ8 scooping out the low end, a de-esser on it, reverb, and a compressor, right? To kind of even out those highs and the lows. Yeah, it's great. Eckhart Tolle has helped me a lot with my spiritual journey, aka life.
When you pay attention to it, makes you still.
And yeah, so I just, I don't know. I like using spoken word. You'll see it in my next song as well. And
as you approach death,
this song's kind of a melancholic song about loss. It's called Dunsworth, named after John Dunsworth.
What it has lost, the spirit rejoices for what it has found.
Sorry, I just wanted to let him talk there. John Dunsworth was one of the actors on Trailer Park Boys, played Officer Leahy, and he passed away. So this song is dedicated to him. So, just some simple spoken word during the intro, breakdown, and outro. Nothing fancy there. Again, some very simple vocal processing just to, it was from like a YouTube video, right? So it needed some massaging to get it sounding right. So next we have this group. Looks like, so I think this area was just real busy in the mix, so I had to scoop out that kind of 1K range in this group. We've got, it's I think this is all choir. No, it's a couple hive patches. So interestingly enough, and I'll go ahead and just play this group from the beginning. I actually wrote these melodies before I wrote the bass line in this song, but the bass line you'll see follows the same pattern, right? And you can see it's copied and pasted, right? It says Omnisphere, even though the bass line's in hive and in massive. The patch that I'm using here is Afterglow. Then I have a men's choir, a boys choir, and 2 hive patches. I've got AZ Old Strings, which I love AZ Old Strings. I use it a lot. And I've got AZ Amorphous. So just some drone notes here at the beginning. And then here at 33, we introduce the choir. This is the drop, right? Here, I'll just turn it up a little bit so you can hear it. I love choir. I can just sit here and listen to this. I love choir patches, man. I use them all the time. I layer choir with my bass lines all the time. You might not hear it. It's very subtle in a lot of my tracks. But bass lines tend to be very very digital, not very analog. And to give them a more organic and analog feel, I tend maybe even like a detuned choir, like slightly detuned. And then we add the boys choir. And some strings. Just to really elevate it. Reverb, EQ, saturation. Every time. Like I said, you're going to see that on so many of my channels, right? So we've got it. Reverb, 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 saturation, reverb, reverb, EQ, obviously on all of them. That's it. You know, there's this one here, sorry. It's just not part of that group. And then next is the bass line. I didn't add those. I love choir. It reminds me of something out of Halo. And most of you know I get a lot of inspiration from video games and video game soundtracks. So yeah, Omnisphere is great, Hive's great. Other than the Neutron Transient Shaper, I think that's all you're seeing for plugins in this song, right? Oh, there was that de-esser. I don't know. There's plenty of de-essers out there. So there's not a lot in the you know, as far as plugins go in this track. Yeah, the second drop, we add another Hive patch, the Stretch Glass song or sound. Sorry, you'll hear that here. And then the bass line again, it just follows that. Oh, sorry, I have everything cranked up. I'm like, what is happening? I was really confused for a second. I apologize. I had turned everything up so you could hear the choir patches. Beautiful. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I love choirs. Bassline just repeats every 32 bars. It's a repeating 32 bar loop. And that almost does it. The only other thing, we have 2 more boys choir patches, right? And these just happen right at the drop. It's this here. Boys choir. Haunting. And yeah, that's Dunsworth, man. Again, most of this I did in one sitting, in one evening. I remember the day fondly. And excuse me, I just needed to have a drink. Yeah, not much else to say except for, you know, keep it simple, right? People love this track. I love this track. Play it all the time. Mixes great with The Lost River, which is a track I did with Human Nature and with Natus. Yeah, I don't know what else to say except for, you know, something I struggled with early on, especially in this stage, was like allowing myself to like sample, right? At first I wanted to like do everything myself, and like I'm not a sound engineer. I don't think I'll ever be a sound engineer. I love drum and bass, I absolutely love it. I love making drum and bass. I love mixing drum and bass. I love listening to drum and bass. And there's never been a better time to get into music production, really. I mean, the bar is relatively low. As you saw, I don't have a lot of plugins. Omnisphere is a little pricey. Hive isn't too bad. Hive 2. You know, this was done with minimal plugins, minimal samples, 3 splice samples. You know, the Shrine sample pack's free. I guess I downloaded this Think About It sample pack from Comics. This Breakage sample pack, maybe $20 in samples. You too can make, and a simple, understanding of the fundamentals of music theory, and you can make this too. Yeah, just real happy with this song. Really, really happy with the way it turned out. And this is one of those songs I can look back on and just really, I always enjoy listening to it, right? There's really nothing I would change in this track. I'm really happy with every element of it. And yeah, I don't know. I always feel kind of bad for artists who, sorry if I'm not looking at the screen, I'm opening the next project. I always feel bad for artists who say, man, like, I hate that song. Right, talking of their own music. And I'm like, why did you put it out then? Right? Like, if you hate it, then don't put it out. Write music and release music that you love. That's my philosophy, and I write music for myself first and foremost. I think people pick up on that. Like, when you are genuine and you write music not like to please crowds, but to please yourself, I'm my own worst critic, so if I'm not happy with my own music, like, why should anyone else like it? I don't know, that's what I think. I love my music. And that might sound super conceited to some people, but like, I love my music. And I don't know, I'm really happy to be able to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain on these 2 tracks, because like I said, it's not complicated. And this next track you're going to see here, again, written in a day. Mix down, yes, of course. I took, it takes me a while to tweak my mix downs, but the general idea of the song, I had it laid out within say 5 hours of starting it, 6 hours. I'll sit down with a fresh pot of coffee, French press, to be exact, and I just go, man. I just go, sometimes the magic happens. Like I said, 30 times in a row might not happen, and then you get that one time, and bam, there's your next song. And it's quite a magical feeling when it does happen. But you have to, keep at it. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens every time. But when it happens, it's awesome, right? Anyone who produces music knows the feeling of just nailing it, of being like, yes, that's it.
But maybe more interesting.
Oh, so 4th Dimension. Let me have a drink of coffee before we get started here. Let you enjoy this, although I'm sure it's very quiet. Hopefully everything's like loud enough, like in comparison to me talking. Last time, like listening back, I realized that the track was maybe a little too loud and I was a little too quiet. And like, if you want to hear the tracks, you can go listen to the tracks, right? I think, anyway, I hope that you can hear. I think I got the balance better this time. I did a few test recordings beforehand. So yeah, 4th Dimension. I'll go ahead and plug this, right? Because it's out April the 28th on the 4th Dimension EP. It's the title track of my forthcoming Focus Recordings EP. And on the same note of shameless self-plugs, you can catch me live April the 28th in Cleveland if you're in the Cleveland area for the launch of my new EP. And then the following Friday, you can catch me live in Pittsburgh with LTJ Bookham on May 5th. So just plugging some of my shows there and, plugging my new EP. The idea of this song, so most of my songs I start with a hook. I don't know if this song has a hook so much as it has a vibe, right? But the idea that I wanted to write a song using this vocal sample from Carl Sagan. So that the idea started with this, the vocal sample.
Astronomers sometimes say that space is curved, or that the universe is finite but unbounded.
Taken from the legendary
What
Cosmos
may be more interesting
TV show.
is the other direction in dimensionality. What about the fourth dimension?
So I had written a song early on called Fourth Dimension. One of my first tracks was Fourth Dimension. And, I was never able to quite finish it. So let's call it more of a sketch, I guess, right? So I wrote this Fourth Dimension sketch, and I sent it to Oris, who's a fantastic producer. I just want to give shouts to Oris, to Yos. Love you, man, if you're watching this. The dude, is an incredible producer. But, we tried, and sometimes that happens with collabs. Sometimes they just don't come to fruition, and sometimes you have to know when to just be like, yeah, you never, it's always a worthwhile pursuit, right? It's never time lost. You always learn something. You learn, hey, maybe I'm good at working with this person, or maybe I'm not, or whatever. But anyway, Oris and I tried to collab on it. That didn't work, so I sent it to Scatterbrain, the Romanian producer, Scatterbrain. Big up Scatterbrain. Also another incredible producer. And, no, it just couldn't get anywhere with it. And it was probably my sketch. I'm not blaming Scatterbrain or Oris. So, 2 years later, the only thing that made it from that original to this is the vocals. Everything else is totally new. So oddly enough, like I said, I started with this vocal sample, and I wanted this to be the Fourth Dimension EP, and it's a very coherent EP. It's kind of like a concept, one coherent vision. I have Starcrossed, Reality Unfolding, Fourth Dimension, and Chasing Satellites. It's a very like kind of outer spacey, atmospheric kind of sounding EP. So anyway, this track, when I started it, I had that idea, the Fourth Dimension, right? So I went and I got pads. I never do this, but I started with pads, right? Instead of starting with like a melody or a lot of times I start by writing the first 32 bars. I started the song by writing the intro, which is very, very backwards to the way I think myself and probably most people usually work. And I started with this pad. I loved this pad. I was just flipping through pads one day, and this thing is long. It's like over a minute long, right? But I really liked the back half of it, right? And I stretched it out, and I got it to sound the way I wanted, and it's not transposed at all. You can see it is in the original key, but it does this kind of swell. Boom. And I was like, man, that's like the perfect thing to build to a drop. So that's how I started this song. And then we just have that pad again, just with some different processing. This one is 100% cranked up on the dry wet. It's 100% wet. It's EQ'd a little differently. And that's just kind of playing during the drop. I've got another pad here. This pad originally is 110 beats per minute. I have this stretched out to 220. Then at the drop, I have it stretched out to 440 beats per minute. So this is something I do in a lot of my songs is I take samples and I stretch them way, 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 way out. Like this could probably be stretched to 880. That's as far as it'll go, right? And, that would sound like garbage, right? But I have a ton of reverb on it. So it kind of turns it into this big, just swimmy, texture-filled pad when you stretch it like that. That's what I think anyway. So, and again, this is an ARP that I stretched out and put a ton of reverb on it, and I turned it into a pad. So this is kind of the bed of our song, is these kind of rich texture-filled pads. That's how I started this song. We've got this hive, just this kind of drone note that's playing the whole time. Was it going to be like a C sharp? Yeah. So that's it. That's how I started the song. And on that note, I was feeling very like kind of futuristic, Blade Runner-y kind of vibe to this song. So I went and I found this patch. This is Omnisphere patch, Hybrid Hollow. And I just put a ton of saturation on it, a bunch of reverb on it, and it's just this like just real epic. The decay is 29 seconds on this reverb, so it just really rings out. It's just, to me, it feels very epic and adds to the atmosphere of it. It gives we've got a lot of like swimmy ethereal pads. This is a little more concrete and a little more of a lead element. Again, this song, we'll get to the more melodic lead elements once we get down to these arps. But this is just me setting the stage, right? This is what I started the song with, right? So yeah, and then I went on to do drums. I don't know. I was, on Splice grabbing samples. I think all these drums pretty much come from sample packs. Much like the previous track, I've got my main drum break. I've edited the pattern, right? I didn't like it's not that I didn't like the pattern, but I didn't want the drum break as it came from Splice or from the sample pack, right? So I've chopped it up in a way that it, is a little bit different, and you can see here's the full break, and I used these, I chopped it into kind of 2-bar segments here. Other than that, I also have this cool little shaker thing. I love this shaker. These are my intro drums and then my breakdown drums. And these, you can see here, I'll show you the envelope, the EQ. So opens, and then the reverb gets wetter and wetter and wetter until the drop. So the drums on this song, again, not complex at all. We've got two things on the drum group. We've got reverb and we've got an EQ, right? So the reverb, the only time that comes into play is during these transitions. That's the automation you're seeing right here is the reverb. That's the dry wet on the reverb. And same with the EQ. We've got basically at the same time as the reverb, except for right there. There's a little reverse drum bit. And this is a very common technique you'll hear in drum and bass. You do an EQ sweep and you do a reverb up. Boom. Right? And then we've got a little delay out on the drums here. Again, just simple little tricks, delaying the drums out, EQ sweeps, reverb sweeps. Here we do a little reverse bit. Boom. Just a little drum edit, just to keep things interesting. Every 16 bars, we're adding a new drum loop. Is the other thing, right? So we've got our two main loops, adding a third break, adding a fourth break, adding a fifth break, and then again, a little delay out here at the very end. Little reverse cymbals. And that's it. That's the drums. Shaker, 5 drum layers and delayed bits, transitions. The main drum group I have copied right here, right? So the reason I do that is because I kind of draw in my side chains by hand. And the way I do that is this little utility tool, right, in Ableton. So you go ahead, you grab your utility, you throw it on the channel, boop, just like that. And then you're going to want to automate your gain. So we can see, and this is just, this is muted. This is the main drum loop. This is where the kick is. And, all the other drum loops have the kick EQ'd out. I didn't show that, did I? But, it's much like Dunsworth. It's going to be much of the same. Where are my drums? Here are the drums. We're going to have this kind of EQ on each one of the drums in order to scoop out that low end. There's an identical EQ on all this. Anyway, this thing's muted. This is only here for the purposes of being able to see the kick. And if we were to solo the bass, you can hear it pulsing because of this automation, right? So the way you do this is you would highlight where your kick is, and you right-click, and you click Insert Shape right here. That's the kind of shape you want. And you can change your shape. You can bring it like that. You can bring it like that. You can bring it up. You can draw it up. You can do it down. Whatever you need to do to get it to sound right, to kind of match this. We're just scooping the bass line out in order to make room for the kick. When the kick hits, that's what a sidechain is, right? And I do it with compression, or I used to do it with compression, sidechain compression. Now I just do it with the utility gain tool. I think a lot of people do it this way. To each their own. You can do whatever you want. I just find that I have a little more control, or I feel like I have a little more control when I do it this way. Yeah. So the bass line is quite simple. Holy cow! I mean, talking about simple, right? We've got the AZ Warm sub bass patch on Hive, which I use in almost all my songs, and so do a number of other artists. Yeah, I mean, look how simple this is, right? I mean, it's essentially 2 notes. I break it up by adding, like a C sharp there, and then we've got the turnaround bass, which is a G sharp. Having that little turnaround note every 32 bars is, I find is a nice touch. But that's it. The F sharp, I kind of break it up, a little pause in the bass. But other than that, that AZ warm sub bass with a bit warmer saturation. That's right here on Ableton. Boop, a bit warmer. It's fantastic. Use it. I do. I know a lot of other people that use it too. Here we have a Serum patch. BA Liquid Neuro. Let me open Serum. Oh God. Okay, never mind. Serum's not going to open because apparently I'm not signed into Splice. I just tweaked the BA Liquid Neuro patch a little bit. It's pretty close to the stock one. A little bit of a bit warmer saturation. And the thing that happens with this patch is it starts out at, minus 26 dB just about. And by the end of the first drop, it's up to 2 dB. The second drop is at 2 dB the whole time. So it's just, kind of grows in intensity for the entirety of the first drop. And then the second drop, we drop with that kind of, that Reese Liquid Neuro bass from the rip. Other than that, there's another Hive bass patch. Here, there's a Drone and Temple Mountain. I use this all the time as kind of a texture to my bass line. I didn't use, like I said, I like to use a choir for a texture. I didn't use that in this song. I'll just go ahead and solo this. It just gives it kind of some Reese kind of texture. Nothing fancy, and it just follows those 2 notes. It doesn't have the attack is very slow on it. Obviously, I could change the attack. I kind of like the slow attack. And Hive, you could change everything there. Yeah, it just follows the main 2 notes of the bass line. So that does that. Next, what do we got? Oh, our first little ARPy guy. So this is an ARP off of Splice. Then I've slowed down quite a bit. Originally, this ARP is... Oh, sorry, I've sped it up, rather. This is the original ARP. I wanted it much faster, right? We can slow down even more. I could keep hitting the wrong button. Let's actually listen to the original, right? So this is just another, none of these samples are just like stock, right? They've been modified quite a bit. So you can see the saturation there. All right. So this is the original, right? And I've just looped this very beginning of it. It kind of changes but I just wanted this little bit, right? So let's hear that again. Bum, 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 boom, 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 boom. So, and this is what we ended up with. So we're going to go ahead and speed that up. And I didn't want any low end to it, right? So I scooped out, like, I've got a pretty severe scoop here, right? I only wanted the tippy tops. But once, listen, we've lost it, right? So how are we going to get that back? Well, I'll tell you how. We're going to saturate the ever-living crap out of it. And that's what we end up with. So that's here for the entirety of the first drop. And it drops out for the first 32 bars of the second drop, because that's kind of our rollout little section. So yeah. Nothing fancy done there, right? We sped it up, we EQ'd it, and we saturated it. And we looped it, right? So you'll see this, like, with most of my samples, I'm not taking the entire sample, right? Some people, you know, they might steal, or not steal, they might use a sample whole cloth, which is absolutely fine. I just try to modify the sample significantly enough that maybe it's not recognizable, because, you know, and not always. Like, I was just listening to a Micah song the other day that had, like, you know, the same exact sample I used in one of my tracks. And I was just like, oh, well, you know, it wasn't modified at all in my song, and it wasn't modified at all in his song. And it's kind of fun sometimes, actually, to be like, oh, that's how he used that sample. That's kind of neat, right? That's just sampling, man. Like, so many songs sampled the same things. And before there was Splice, people were sampling real songs, and the same person was sampling, or different people were sampling the same songs, right? So it's, listen, whatever. Just do you. Do whatever makes you happy. And if people criticize you for sampling, that's their problem, man. Oh, goodness. All right, what do we got here? Oh, this is just like a fun little transition effect that happens. And, you know, it's like the first 16 bars. It's kind of a build. You know, just like a big swell. Just to give the song some momentum, right? Swell, 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 swell. It's got a huge decay on it, right? It's very wet. Because if it didn't have that, right? If we didn't have this reverb on it, it would just be like a shelf. It would just fall off. Watch. Right? But, and listen to how different that sounds without the reverb, right? And I turned it into this kind of big atmospheric melodic swell by adding all this reverb. So again, like, this is the original sample, you know, or what you just heard is the original sample. And I just have it, you know, it's not, no one's going to ID that sample, right? It's an ARP that's been turned into something totally different. So yeah, there's that. We'll go down to this Hive track. We've already kind of talked a little bit about the vocals. Oh, one last thing I do want to talk about. First off, the vocals. We've got this one. We've got this one. This one's
The other direction in dimensionality. The fourth dimension.
I just kind of cut out the words I wanted to have a delay, like dimensionality and dimension, right? And I just kind of put them here with some delay on them, right? And then I have this whatever are they talking about, which was, I think, my wife's idea. I think she told me to add whatever are they talking about.
Whatever are they talking about?
And then I have this fun little automation on the delay, which you can see here. And it has a really cool effect. And it like pitches it up and down. I just thought it was cool. I don't know. I do it at the end of Diamonds too. If you know that track by me, I do this kind of sounds like it's almost like a Doppler effect. So if you know what that is, you know, like when a police car drives by or something, you know, the sound, the way the sound changes, or like someone falling off a cliff or something. Anyway, we've got some Hive Plicky Plucks. This is great. I love the way this stuff sounds. It's just some simple, it's BL Strange Magic. right? So it's nothing fancy here, just the preset. I don't think I modified it at all. And what I did with this is I put some panning on it. I love doing things in stereo because it sounds good when I'm producing it in headphones, and then you go to the club and it's all some to mono, so it doesn't really matter. But I don't know if it'll come through in the recording, but it is panning. There's a significant pan. You can see the visual representation of that pan here. Bit of saturation, lots of delay. The feedback's 95%, which the only way I can make it higher is by freezing it, which you saw me use that technique in my previous song. EQ as per usual. And this just, it's the fourth dimension, man. We're out in outer space, maybe amongst the asteroid belt. Maybe there's like a meteor shower. And then on the second drop, there's I kind of doubled this up, and that way the two things are kind of swirling around, and they're like dancing, and kind of dancing around each other, right? And you can see I kind of have them hitting at different times as well, and you're kind of getting different effects by just, you can hear it. It's very cool. I think it's very cool. I mean, I could just sit here all day with like a MIDI controller and just like play with effects and turn knobs and hit buttons. I love this kind of. I should write ambient, right? That's what Willem keeps telling me to do, like ambient remixes of my own tracks, because you take out the drums, you take out the bass, and you're left with a lot of really cool textures I think they're really cool textures that would make for some cool ambient tracks. So seriously, something that you probably see from me someday is and Bop did this too. He did his Punk's Not Dead LP. He did Ambient's Not Dead, which I listen to that thing all the time. I love ambient. Selected Ambient Works is a huge part of the reason I got into electronic music. Big up Aphex Twin. Selected Ambient Works 1 and 2, two of the greatest collections of music ever written. But enough about that. And last but not least, we've got synth loop, which is how we really progress our song. I love flangers, right? I'm just like a little kid. Like I grew up playing guitar. I loved FX pedals, like just riffing and hitting the flanger pedal and hitting the delay and just jamming out, man. And that's, I kind of bring that mentality to my productions. And there's a little art that I played here. Very reverbed out kind of thing. And that's our big payoff, right? So like I'll just go ahead. I'm gonna go back to the first drop here and kind of talk you through the structure of both of these songs. Not a whole lot happens at the drop, and this is kind of par for the course. This is not atypical of drum and bass. We have a kind of stripped back drop where we're kind of setting the stage, and we've got the bass, we've got the drums, and everything's sounding good, and everything's nice and strong, and hopefully sounds very good, impactful in the club, right? We've got big strong bass line, but the payoff, the real money shot has to happen 32 bars into the drop, and you get that in Dunsworth, and you get that in this song, where you have this build and this build and this build, and you really gotta pay it off at this point. So you have your little drum edit, you have, maybe a crash or a reverse cymbal, you have this swell, and then you have the money shot. Then you have you really have to elevate your song at this point, right? And hopefully that accomplishes that. It's just a splice sample. Again, I didn't use the whole loop. It's just kind of this little bit of it looped. Is it pitched up or down? Nope, it's in the original key. Flanger on it. The flanger, is synced to the BPM. Saturation a bit warmer. Reverb, there's automation on the reverb. As you can see, it kind of builds and builds and builds and builds. And yeah, that is Fourth Dimension. That's the title track, as I said, of my forthcoming Focus Recordings EP. And that's gonna do it. So yeah, that was Dunsworth and Fourth Dimension. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed my little some ramblings about drum and bass and about my music and music production. And I don't know, man. Like I said, I produce music for myself. I hope you like it, because I love it. I love drum and bass. I love mixing drum and bass. I love writing drum and bass. It's such a pleasure to be able to share my music with you, and it's so great to be able to connect with so many of you, whether it's through these track breakdown videos. I have a weekly podcast, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/alpharhythm. I have weekly mixes. I do mixes all over the place, and man, I don't know, it's just nothing but love here. And the amount of love that I receive from you guys too is really, really exceptional. So I can't thank you enough for your support. And if you're thinking about getting into producing, go for it. I thought about it for years, and then, the biggest thing I did was finally ask for help. I've had a lot of mentors over the years. I had help from Andre from Human Nature, from Willem, who I'm working on a collab with Willem and Leo Wood right now. And it's just like, Mike Kiss. I had mentoring sessions with Mike Kiss, and I'm currently also working with Bop. Some of my all-time favorite producers, they've got Patreons. I know Bop has a Patreon. Willem has a Patreon. They're out there and they're available for these one-on-one sessions, and they'll show you how they do it. And a lot of times it's a lot less complicated than you would think, which is really, it's great. Anyone can do it. So get yourself a DAW, maybe a MIDI controller, and some samples, and just experiment. See what happens, because you might surprise yourself. I know I have. So, hey, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in. I love you all very, very much. Peace out. One love.
What's up, guys? My name's Axel Boy, and welcome to my studio. I'm a UK bass music producer. I like to make UK bass, dubstep, drum and bass, and I'm well known for making sounds like this. If you like those sorts of sounds, then you'll love this masterclass that I've created with DNB Academy. It takes you from start to finish on my creative process when making a DNB banger. The course is over 6 hours long, and I'll be using Logic Pro X. I'll be covering sound design, bassline creation, composition and arrangement, and advanced synthesis using Serum. I'll also be covering mixing and mastering to show you how to get that loud and precise Axel Boy sound. This course includes the Logic profile with all of the samples and all of the presets, so you can dive straight in and get creative. It's been really great to share this with you, and I hope you guys enjoy the course.